Welcome to Reading Crossbow. I'm Rob, and today I wanted to discuss the epidemic of toxic fandoms. And it is an epidemic, at least it seems like it if you watch the news or go into online discussion boards, because online communities of fans are just ruining media of all kinds: movies, games, and even books. According to some, all fandoms are toxic. Others maybe link the size of the fandom as being the cause of where there's this tipping point from innocence to toxicity based on how many people are involved. I've even seen it argued that any activities beyond the single consumption of a given property, such as participating in online discussions, really is just the starting point of a slippery slope into toxic fandom. I personally love Wikia sites. I like watching lore and theory videos and reading discussions on Reddit. And problematically to some, I've also completely abandoned certain media properties which no longer appeal to me. So, I guess I'm a toxic fan too. Now, I can hear some people kind of saying, no, that's not what they're talking about when they say toxic fandom. What they're talking about is the fans who gatekeep, harass, overreact to change, or have this strong sense of entitlement to their favorite brands. Those are the bad fans, and it's a straw man for me to link those bad fans with the other normal fans. Yet, isn't the reverse of that just a different straw man? The reality is, just fandom exists on a spectrum. You have casual fans, to extreme defenders of a property, to some outright criminals. The question isn't whether or not a fandom is toxic, but where we draw the line between a passion and problematic behavior. I think the place to start really is to follow the money. Fandoms, mostly because of things like trademarks and copyright, generally aren't revenue generators. We are the consumers. We buy the swag and the t-shirts and the useless shit we put on shelves as a reminder of the things we like. But who benefits financially from amplifying toxicity? Well, we can start off with the journalists and the talking heads that we see on sites like right here on YouTube. People whose career depends on attention and clicks. There is a deep motivation for writers and influencers to find flaws in a given property and exploit that for attention. Many channels I once enjoyed lost their original appeal to me as they chased down engagement metrics, slipping into these weird conspiratorial echo chambers. Over time, the allure of genuine critique gave way to these exaggerated fear-mongering. And clearly, I was in the minority for disengaging with those channels, because those negativity-driven channels and news sites have only grown in popularity. Negativity gets way, way more attention than positivity, unfortunately. You know, there's this old saying that sex sells. But unless you're this tantric master who can just edge for days, there is a limit to sex's staying power. Rage, however, that can last. You don't have any post-nut clarity with rage. Only the need for more. And to the rage-driven content machine, everything is a valid target. But it's not just newspapers and YouTubers who monetize negativity. Let's go with someone big. Lucasfilm, for example, has been known to engage in a practice of preemptive fan blaming, where they issue statements before a property even releases, warning that toxic fans are going to inevitably hate this new material because of some certain social issue. But the specific issue really is secondary. The real goal here is to establish an adversary. And it's not just studios. Publishers and authors have been known to have their own press releases explaining how this amazing new book or comic is going to be new and inclusive, and the only way that it could possibly fail is if those toxic fans just can't accept the new ideas. Once again, negative articles and videos get made, which we all know get eyeballs. I mean, this is just marketing. Better yet, it's cheap marketing, because the publishers and studios don't have to pay for the ads. They get attention for their new book or movie, and it's free marketing, because controversy generates buzz, and nothing generates buzz more than outrage. Even if a controversy might alienate a portion of an audience, it could still be a win if more consumers become aware of this new release. And we all know that some angry fans are just going to rage consume it out of spite. Think of how many shows and movies that get watched by haters, just so they can hate even harder. Other than marketing, there is another reason that publishers and studios push stories about toxicity. It's an effective defense against criticism. More and more, it feels like toxic fandom is being used as this artificial shield to deflect and silence genuine criticism. If disliking a franchise can be framed as racism or sexism, then creators never have to address poor writing, bad storytelling, or just weak marketing. So if it is a self-fulfilling prophecy and fans don't actually engage with a given media property, well, it's easy. The toxic fans were the problem. Criticism just gets lumped in with the other vile personal attacks, and it all gets reported as harassment. It's definitely not the bad writing and poor marketing. And let's be honest. How often do you hear about toxic fans attacking a franchise only for that movie or book to later emerge with glowing reviews and cult classic status? Well, pretty much never. More often than not, the properties that enraged fans really weren't very good. More often than not, the stuff that the toxic fans raged about really do suck. Sure, it's not the pure evil drivel that the talking heads make it out to be. They're exaggerating because that's their job. But it's not really good either. The really good stuff rises above all of that. Creators and franchises that face strong and vocal criticism often do feel compelled to improve their work. When fans are loud about what's wrong, creators can feel forced to listen and evolve. Constructive criticism is a valuable tool for any creative endeavor, and labeling criticism toxicity is a great way to shut down any issues with your actual product. So, both creators and influencers are making money by rage baiting fans. That doesn't excuse harassment and threats that creators and fans alike experience. To be clear, the worst of this toxic behavior is criminal. People who make threats, dox, swat, or stalk, they deserve to be in prison or getting mental help. There simply is no excuse for that criminal behavior, period. But it's outsiders that tend to judge a fandom based on a handful of problematic individuals or high-profile negative incidents. The loudest and most extreme voices often attract the most attention, leading people to assume the entire community shares in that behavior. Unfortunately, it really is these criminals and rage bait influencers who are the voices that get heard. This is true in every space of our entire world. Imagine a religious extremist and how they can taint the perception of all members of their faith with their evil actions. There is no difference with that and toxic fandoms. Well, with that out of the way, let's talk about some specific behaviors of these toxic fandoms. Let's start off with fan entitlement. And this is a book podcast, so let's lead off with a literature example of fan entitlement. Patrick Rothfuss and George R.R. Martin's fandoms are some of what I feel like are the most likely to be accused of toxic fan entitlement. Fans are being accused of feeling entitled to the next book or the series completion for these books that have been in progress for more than a decade. I am also a fan of both of these series, and I am also frustrated by their lack of progress. But it does feel like at times that the source of a lot of the problems with these two specific series is the authors gaslighting fans by claiming progress that never happened. Stringing people along with false promises is a definite contributor to that so-called entitlement. If you don't believe me, there's some great videos right here on YouTube that you can go, and they go through the progress claims for those two series and show how over the last decade, nothing has actually been written. Famously, Neil Gaiman actually came out in defense of George R.R. Martin, noting that authors don't owe fans anything. And I honestly can't disagree with that. George R.R. Martin and Patrick Rothfuss do not owe me a book. Well, except for the charity chapter. That was definitely paid for and is definitely owed. In fact, there's no reason to actually not just release, something. Yes, it might not be the final draft of that charity chapter. But honestly, I think the fans would actually love it more if it wasn't. Because when and if a book was actually released, it would give them the opportunity to, compare the two versions and theorize about why certain passages changed. I mean, for myself, I kind of just wish they'd both just hire a ghostwriter so everyone, including the authors, can just move on. But I do feel like entitlement also goes both ways. The original inspiration for this video today was a New York Times article I read about this new vampire movie called Sinners. The article noted that while it was doing pretty well, because it was this new IP that didn't have an established audience, it really wasn't going to do as well as similar budgeted movies. On this channel, we've discussed how a successful novel will spawn a bunch more almost copycat novels, as publishers will actually go out hunting for books which can be marketed to a specific fan base. It's why you get these years of vampire romance and then Hunger Games copycats and urban fantasy clones. When one hits it big, the publishers are like, let's get some more of that, and we'll sell it to the exact same people. I mean, if you're an unpublished author, following these trends is a pretty good strategy to get your first book deal. Publishers and studios, I feel like they feel entitled to fans purchasing their products. So much so that if they pivot their content or their marketing to try to gain a new audience, they expect an old audience to continue purchasing regardless. And if they don't, well, that's right, those are toxic fans who just can't handle change. Let's go with an example you probably have never heard. Over the last 30 years, I've attended a lot of concerts for the band Tool, more than any other two bands combined. I'm a big fan. I enjoy the concerts and the albums. However, the last two concerts I attended were a bit different than the rest. Both were after the pandemic, and the entire arena had been converted into assigned seating. Sure, it's a lot more fun to do general admission, but especially the first time, I understood the situation. The world was in a weird place. The problem really came down to the music balance. The vocals had been turned down to almost unhearable, and the rest of the band had been turned up to the point of distortion. It became hard to even understand what song I was listening to at times. After the show, I would say I was more than a little disappointed when this happened. But the previous dozen or so concerts I'd been to before certainly outweighed one bad show. So, 2 years later, I attended a Tool concert again. Unfortunately, everything was the same. Inaudible vocals, distorted sound, and assigned floor seating. If you had a different experience watching Tool during the same time period, I believe you, and I'm jealous. I wish that was my experience too. This is a band I love. So now I need to decide, how many concerts should I not enjoy before it's okay for me to say no? Obviously, a long history of great shows, for me, that number was more than one bad concert. But now what? Is it more than two? Honestly, I don't know. Because I've been to other concerts since the pandemic and had great experiences. How you react to that story should probably be the same that if I told you that I stopped reading Harry Potter and Marvel Comics, or stopped watching the Star Wars and Doctor Who for pretty much the same reason. To be clear, I stopped each of those probably earlier than you think. But the exact last movie, comic, or book really isn't that important. I enjoyed those properties for a long time, but eventually I just no longer enjoyed it. I still enjoyed what I liked, just like I still enjoy listening to Tool and watching Ant-Man. But I don't see why I should continue paying for movies or books that I no longer enjoy. But the rage marketing machine says, I quit because I'm a toxic fan. I can't handle change, or I feel entitled to a product they don't want to make anymore. Creators leverage fandoms to promote their new media projects because it works. Fandoms can all but guarantee minimum sales. Passionate fan bases can keep entire franchises alive years after the fact, allowing writers a reliable and trusted audience for future projects. But some definitely give the impression that they feel entitled to fans' money. Just because you liked something in the past, that fan should have to pay for it again and again, even if they don't enjoy it anymore. This kind of entitlement means that the studio can focus on just gathering up new fans, as those old fans should keep returning no matter what. And it doesn't matter if they do, because if they don't, they're toxic. There's something just deeply hypocritical with these creators who rail against toxic fandoms, but willingly exploit that same fandom for money and rage bait. Now, I feel like gatekeeping is one of those toxic traits that's more associated with book fans than other media. It seems like it's easy to discriminate because you know how much someone read. How many books in a series or how many random details can you remember is a pretty good hallmark for the gatekeeping of who the real fans are. There are multiple book fandoms that act like victims, despite being fans of some of the most popular authors in the world. They frequently gate check who real fans are. If you haven't read absolutely everything, then your opinion doesn't matter. Sure, there might be some gatekeeping in the visual media, but I think the time investment of reading is quite a bit different, making the gatekeeping of true fans in literature far more pervasive. While I would prefer that communities were more welcoming and less defensive, there is some good that can come out of this gatekeeping. Gatekeeping can help franchises maintain integrity and avoid pandering for mass appeal at the expense of artistic depth. Gatekeeping can also lead to fan-on-fan hate, or you get these weird situations where you get negative fandoms. These are like communities dedicated to their hatred of a particular franchise or other fandom. Communities that make it their mission to troll, harass authors and studios and other fans of a property. Well, those also get cast as toxic fandoms, despite being the exact opposite of fans. I think these reverse fandoms are often the ones who actually are generating the most online discourse that gets classified as toxic fandom. You see, the strongest emotions, both positive and negative, often come from a deep love for a franchise. Toxic criticism is often a reflection of this intense investment, showing that an audience truly does care. And while a small minority of vocal or criminal fans can become that stereotype which all fans can get labeled as, we do need to acknowledge that genuine toxic behavior exists, but it doesn't represent the greater fandom. Critics might say that toxic fans create these hostile environments, but one could also argue that pressure focuses creators to deliver their best work rather than just half-assing it. Creatives definitely seem to both demonize and leverage toxic fandoms. And while it might feel that a given toxic fandom excludes newcomers, others would argue that it's these strong communities that keep fandoms authentic and prevent the dilution of original ideas. In the end, a passionate fan base, whether it's seen as toxic or not, is vital to keeping all entertainment alive and meaningful. High expectations, intense discussions, and critical feedback create stronger franchises and book series, better content, and a more engaged audience. Well, that's all I got for today. I hope this was an informational journey through my views on the toxic fandom debate. Now, this channel mostly focuses on sci-fi and fantasy book reviews. So be sure to like and subscribe and come back and check out some of the books that Lena and I enjoy forcing each other to read, as it's often pretty entertaining when she gets me to read some terrible romance novel and I get her to read some truly grimdark. It's always a lot of fun to see those reactions. So please like and subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. It really helps a small channel like us get more eyeballs on our content. Thank you very much for watching.